This paper was presented at Diagrams 2021 about structuralist analysis for neural network system diagrams. So our motivation for this was within the context of neural network system diagrams used at scholarly venues, so like in conference proceedings. How can we describe the differences between these diagrams based on the things that we see from those diagrams themselves, and how can we quantitatively cluster diagrams? So for us, the quantitative aspect here was quite important because in order to gain impact within the community, who are a very quantitative community, it's necessary to have some kind of quantitative backing for what we're talking about. So probably the easiest thing is if I show you some examples. So these are some example diagrams. So there's 3 here, one on the left with different boxes, some colors being used, arrows, boundaries. The one in the center, different data sizes being shown. The one on the right has some visual example and lots of sub figures. And then another couple here. So one on the left is quite simple, but includes a single instantiation running through it. So it's a single worked example. And then the other is, again, showing some dimensional change, but in quite a different way, and has more mathematical notation over the top. And there's the references there for those. So hopefully you can see through that very, very quick whistle through that these diagrams are very visually different. So what we wanted to do was to try to examine that. And so there's a few ways that we could consider that. So sort of semantics, syntactics, pragmatics, and empirics. So these being sort of diagrammatic ways of approaching things. And in this analysis, what we're really looking at is empirics. So is there anything statistical that we can say about the use of aspects within these particular signs? So our approach was corpus-based. So we looked at the different venues on the left, and we sampled from the papers there, and then extracted the diagrams from those. So it was actually necessary for us to do this manually because the existing diagram extraction tools do not have a high enough precision or recall for us to be able to use them without actually systematically omitting certain types of diagram. And what we tried to do was to separate out content and diagrammatic features. So by that, I mean, so content being stuff like the scope of the diagram. So is it the entire neural network architecture or some subset of it? Things like whether it has embedding shown, whether it shows dimensional change, whether it attempts to articulate that concept. So not about how it's visually encoded. Whereas the diagrammatic features are more like, does it include arrows to show data transformation? So there's a full list available in the appendix for how we came about those. So it's really just presence or absence of things. So when we looked at that, we had more diagrammatic features than we had content features. I don't think that matters too much. But you can see that the number of content features in each diagram is correlated with the number of diagrammatic features. So there's a few different ways of interpreting that, but essentially more complicated diagrams, more complicated. So as you have more different content, you're also either requiring or as an author more inclined towards using more diagrammatic features in order to hold those together. So that's kind of as you would expect. So in terms of then what to do with this large volume of data, so we have 24 content and 45 different diagrammatic dimensions. So we can consider each diagram that we've extracted to be within this sort of 69-dimensional space. Can we use k-means clustering to see which ones are more similar in that sort of sense? So this kind of k-means clustering is very common when you're trying to classify things within machine learning generally. So it's the kind of approach that would appeal to neural network practitioners. And then we can, based on the way that they are clustered together, we can try to identify whether there are whether there are kind of groupings of diagrams that, for example, use mathematical notation and arrows, and they're all quite clustered together because they're not using so much of a different color to group. So we did that, and it was all right. We identified some clusters, and so visual, mathematical, lightweight, and unorthodox. So it was necessary to have a fairly large bucket for things that didn't fall neatly into the other ones. And as you may recall, the diagrams are extremely heterogeneous, so that's not unsurprising that is required to be a large category. So I think it's probably best if I just show you those examples again and show you which buckets they went into. So this first one, quite lightweight, has some words, blocks, and things like this. The central one is mathematical because it's more about the data. The third fell into the unorthodox one. So again, these were sort of automated classifications, but that we've sort of provided some intuition over the top of. So this unorthodox one is because it includes a lot of visual features, but also has mathematical notation. So in our high dimensional space, it's sort of out in one corner because it's using so many different visual encoding features. And that diagram actually is analyzed as part of our VisDNA paper, which is also available in this volume. Then the others, this one also is unorthodox, actually because it uses fewer things. It just doesn't fit nicely into one of these different buckets. And then this final one is visual because it's, rather than talking about precise numbers of dimensions, it's sort of coloring things in and using different things here. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor of some of the potential of doing something of this sort to try to quantitatively cluster diagrams. So the conclusion really from this work is that statistical analysis of a natural diagram corpus is possible. So I didn't make any of those diagrams. I've just been analyzing them through observation and statistical techniques. And that quantitative clustering of diagrams using features is possible. And so if this is of any interest, then please do get in touch or like this video, because it's great to have some engagement on this to see whether we can. Thank you very much.